Welcome back to Between the Lines. Today, let's analyze Manly Hopkins' God's Grandeur. To begin, I'll read the poem. God's Grandeur. The world is charged with the grandeur of God. It will flame out like shining from shook foil. It gathers to greatness like the ooze of oil. Crushed. Why do men then not wreck his rod? Generations have trod, and all is seared with trade, blared, smeared with toil, and wears man's smudge and shares man's smell. The soil is bare now, nor can foot feel being shod. And for all this, nature is never spent. There lives the dearest freshness deep down things, and though the last lights off the black west went, O morning at the brown brink eastward springs, because the Holy Ghost over the bent world broods with warm breast and with bright wings. What a beautiful poem. This sonnet is a poem of praise for the boundless and magnificent creative power of God. God's presence can be felt through nature. It is like a fire, like an electric current. It is alive. It is eternal. But the poem also looks at the other side of things. It looks at how men disregard God's power, how careless they are with nature, how they, or perhaps I should start saying how we abuse and even try to replace nature with our own creations, with our own constructs of civilization. At the end, though, the poem makes it clear that no matter what we do, God's power and His presence through nature will never disappear. Let's get into this grand poem and work through the difficult diction and hidden poetic devices. Let's get in between the lines. Line 1. The world is charged with the grandeur of God. We have two words here that are begging for our attention: charged and grandeur. To be charged with something means to be energized by it. A charge is a force, a power, usually associated with electricity. What is grandeur? This is greatness, magnificence, loftiness, gloriousness. So, on the surface, this line is saying that the glory, the greatness of God is coursing through the world like an electric current. It is active, moving, living. The wind moves and howls. The currents of rivers and torrents of waterfalls mightily flow on their course. The sun rises over the horizon and animals run through the forests. The energy of our world is nature. Line 1 is an explanation of the poem's title. The whole poem will go on to illustrate how we can see God's grandeur all around us, and how it is this grandeur, this energy, this presence that we see through nature that gives the world life and meaning. Saying the world is charged gives us a metaphor. The grandeur of God, the mountains, the seas, the winds, the sky, the sun, the moon, the creatures, are compared to an electric current. In the same way that plugging your phone into the wall gives it life, it is God's grandeur that charges, that energizes this world. We also see some alliteration in grandeur and God. This alliteration tells us that there's a close connection between the two words. We cannot separate God from grandeur. God Himself is grand, is He not? And there is no grandeur, no greatness without God. Before we move on, we must fully appreciate the diction of line 1. Remember, diction is about word choices made by the poet. Charge here means not only this moving energy, but it's also a command, a commission, an order. If someone charges you to do something, if someone gives you a charge, if something is in your charge, if you are in charge of something, it means you have a responsibility to do something. So here we see that God's grandeur comes with a charge, a responsibility. We are responsible for God's grandeur. We are stewards of the earth. We need to take care of the earth. We need to protect the environment. When we look at the words in a poem, we have to think about the various meanings, the various connotations that words have. Charge can mean a duty or instruction. It can also have a negative connotation. It can mean an accusation, a prosecution, the way someone can be charged with murder. With this in mind, what other meaning can we find in "the world is charged with the grandeur of God"? It means God is accusing us. God is saying we have not fulfilled our responsibility in taking care of the world, in looking after His grandeur. These various meanings of the word charge give us a number of options for how we interpret the first line and for how we think about the rest of the poem. Let's go to line 2. It will flame out like shining from shook foil. Let's break it down. It, meaning the grandeur of God, will flame out. To flame out could mean to burst out into flames. So God's grandeur was first like an electric charge and is now a raging fire, a fire that cannot be put out. Flames flicker as they rage. You know what else flickers? Shook foil. With a good light source, if you shake a piece of foil, you will see gleaming flickers, quick, bright reflections. So in the first half of the line, we have a metaphor. It will flame out. This metaphor compares God's grandeur to a fire. In the second half of the line, we have a simile, like the shining from shook foil. The simile explains the metaphor and gives us more visual imagery. We also have some alliteration in the line, in the repeated sh sound in shining from shook foil. This produces some auditory imagery. And we can also hear the electric charge from line 1. To flame out also means to flare up, to become enraged. So we have a grandeur that is not only as majestic as a fire, but also as dangerous as a fire, as destructive as a fire. Nature can be a bright fire that consumes everything in its path. Think about earthquakes, tsunamis, tornadoes, volcanic eruptions, asteroid impacts, the supernovae that occur when stars die. Think about black holes, spheres with gravitational pulls so strong that not even light can escape their grasp. I might be getting a little carried away here, but the point is, nature isn't just beautiful, it's also deadly. Look at the next sentence. It gathers to greatness, like the ooze of oil crushed. First, let's analyze the first part. It gathers to greatness. Here we see that nature converges upon itself. It congregates, it assembles, it collects itself in order to reach its full potential. When water gathers, it becomes a river, an ocean, a flood. When wind gathers, we get a storm, a hurricane, a tornado. When trees gather, we get a forest. When sand gathers, we get a desert. The power of nature's unity is heard in the alliterated g sounds. It gathers to greatness. Listen to the immense power when we combine the alliteration from line 1 and line 3. God's grandeur gathers to greatness. Amazing, isn't it? Just like in the previous line, a simile is used to further explain. God's grandeur gathers to greatness like the ooze of oil crushed. This refers to the extraction of oils from various flowers and fruits and so on. For example, olives are crushed to give you olive oil. The crushed olives can now ooze. Oozing is a flowing motion, but not like water. Something can ooze if it's a little thicker than water. We can even hear the oozing effect in the assonance in the line. Ooze, oil. Especially the long oo sound gives us the sound of oozing. Anyhow, the oozing here means that the oil is rich and thick. God's grandeur, when it gathers to greatness, is like a rich oil. The word ooze has some strong connections to nature, and so again we see how diction can be used to reinforce certain ideas. An ooze is soft mud or wet earth. It is also often used to describe the slow flow of natural juices and secretions. In the first two lines, with the electricity, fire, and flickering of light, we saw the swiftness of nature. Now we see that nature can also be a slow, careful force. Nature is fast in the rushing of wind and in the quaking of the earth, but it is slow in the aging of trees, in the formation of rocks. The contrast of images that give us both slowness and quickness indicates that we should appreciate all qualities, all sides, all dimensions of nature. We see that the word crushed falls into the next line, and then immediately halts with a period. Here, two poetic devices are used in unison. At the end of line 3, we have an enjambment, which means the line runs into line 4 without stopping. In comparison, lines 1 and 2 are end-stopped, meaning they end with a punctuation, and each line is a complete thought. But line 3 is different. Instead of ending smoothly, it continues into line 4. Right after that enjambment, we have a sudden, almost crushing stop with a period here. This kind of sudden stop is called a caesura, and it brings greater effect to the word crushed, as we actually come to a crushing stop as we read the line. Crushed carries with it certain negative connotations. When something is crushed, it is destroyed. When someone is crushed, they are heartbroken. We learned in line 2 that nature can be a raging fire. Here at the beginning of line 4, we learned that nature can also crush us like a boulder, like a meteor. Now we come to a rhetorical question. Why do men then not wreck his rod? First of all, what the heck is wreck? This is an outdated word that means to obey, to heed, to be concerned with, to listen to. That is why when someone doesn't obey or care about anything, they are considered to be reckless. So, back to the question, why do men then not wreck his rod? Who is the his here? Certainly, it is God, the same God mentioned in line 1. And what does the rod of God represent? In this metaphor, the rod of God represents his rulership, his authority. Just as a king's scepter represents his authority, a shepherd's rod represents his authority, his guidance. He uses it to command and protect his sheep. God is biblically often considered to be a shepherd, and his people are his sheep. Since the rod is a physical item that is actually connected with rulership, the metaphor of the rod is a special type of metaphor called a metonym. More on metonymy in a different video. You can also check out this analysis if you want to see some interesting effects of metonymy. So let's look at the meaning of the question now. Why do men ignore the authority of God? The word then in line 4 is used to connect the question to everything that was said before. It is like saying, after all that I have mentioned, after seeing the power, the grandeur of God, why do we still not obey him? The tone here is one of incredulousness and great disappointment. The speaker can't believe that after witnessing the grandeur of God, we choose to disregard him. The importance of the question is underscored by two devices in the line, alliteration and assonance. We have alliteration in the repeated r sound, in wreck and rod. We have assonance in the repeated eh sound, in men, then, wreck. Remember the electricity from line 1? The rod here might be a sneaky reference to lightning rods, which are used to attract lightning so that it doesn't strike other things. For example, people. Remember the gathering of greatness from line 3? Here we might see that lightning being gathered to hit the lightning rod. Another connotation of the rod is that of punishment. The rod of correction often refers to flogging or other kinds of reprimands. In other words, God has the ability to punish us. In fact, many people think that God's preferred way of punishing people for their sins is to strike them down with lightning. So why are we brazen enough to disobey? There is more we can find in the word rod, but let's go on to the next line. Generations have trod, have trod, have trod. Here we get the image of a time lapse. We can see generation after generation treading upon the earth. Trod here is the past participle of tread, which means to walk or step. It also means to trample upon. So we see men trampling upon the earth, destroying the earth, over generations, over many, many years. We see a repetition in have trod, have trod, have trod. Since the phase is repeated back to back to back with nothing in between, we can call this repetition an epizeuxis. This device reflects how continuous and repetitive the trampling is. It never stops. It goes on and on and on. We continue to abuse the environment, to destroy the earth through every age of mankind. This epizeuxis also creates the rhythm of walking. As we repeat the line, we can hear the movement of footsteps like a destructive army marching across the earth. Have trod, have trod, have trod, have trod, have trod, have trod. The alliterated d sound within the repetition also gives us that heavy stepping sound. Trud, 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 d, d, d. We have some lovely internal rhymes in the next line. And all is seared with trade, blared, smeared with toil. We have three important adjectives here: seared, blared, smeared. They all share the connotation of something being ruined, spoiled. We have ruined all. We have ruined everything with trade and toil, with the industries and infrastructures we have created. The toil refers to the work that we do that harms the environment, which became very significant during the Industrial Revolution, which was happening when this poem was written. The trade here refers to economical development. We destroy wildlife, plants, land, for the sake of making things to trade, such as clothes. These things are traded by ships and planes, which pollute the environment. Let's look a little more deeply at these three important adjectives in the line. What about sear? To sear something is to burn it, to scorch it, to make it too dry. Because of us, nature is running dry, waters are drying up, wildlife is drying up as we drive species into extinction by hunting and fishing. What about blared? If something is blared, it is blurry, dim, difficult to see or see through. We have blared nature. The crystal clear waters have become dirty. The pristine verdant forests have been cut down. The soils have become contaminated with chemicals. The perfect ecology of wildlife has become corrupted. Also, mankind's own sense of vision is blared. This means we're not thinking straight. We don't think about the future. Our vision is cloudy. And that is why we can so comfortably ruin this world that we must continue to exist in. What about smear? To smear something is to make it dirty, to get some messy substance on it. This again is a reference to pollution. So to summarize this line, we have polluted the world with our human endeavors. So in line 6, we see that all, meaning all the world, all of nature, all of God's creation, is messed up by humans. In line 7, we see that all wears man's smudge and shares man's smell. So the all here is the creation of God, and it is wearing man's smudge. Smudge here is similar to the adjectives from the previous line. The connotation of being spoiled is continuing. We see here that nature is smudged. Nature has become corrupted. It has been damaged. Almost like the speaker is hissing, we hear the frustration in the sibilants, that is, the alliterated s sound. Listen. Seared, smeared, wears, man's, smudge, shares, man's, smells, soil. The colon after smell gives us an abrupt stop near the end of the line. This is a caesura, like the one used in line 4. Just like nature, the poem has come to a halt. Next, we have an enjambment, just like we did in line 3. In almost all other lines so far, we see a punctuation at the end. Just as how the lack of punctuation at the end of line 3 brought emphasis to the word crushed, this lack of punctuation has a certain effect. This time, as the soil spills over into the next line and becomes bare, we get a picture of soil erosion. The lack of punctuation signals the lack of stability in the soil, the lack of anything to hold it in place. Due to deforestation, the soils are eroding. By the last line of stanza 1, the earth is now bare, meaning naked, uncovered, exposed. Bare also means the minimum. If you just barely pass your exam, it means you got the minimum score to pass. In other words, you almost failed. Here, in this word, we see that nature is at the brink of collapse. Let's look at the next piece of the line. Nor can foot feel being shod. Being shod means wearing shoes. So this phrase means because we wear shoes, we can no longer feel the earth. We're no longer connected to the earth. The shoes separate us from being one with nature. Even literally, when we wear shoes, we are unable to feel the ground beneath our feet. The shoes here might be a symbol that represents all of the self-made conveniences of man. The more we create for ourselves, the more we separate ourselves from the grandeur of God, and thereby from God Himself. We no longer walk and enjoy fresh flowers and fresh air. We drive in cars and buses. We take trains. The more convenient life becomes, the more disconnected from nature we become. Now, as we analyze line by line, remember that the whole poem is connected. The shoes we see at the end of this stanza are on the feet that we saw back in line 5. Remember the generations treading and trampling upon the earth? Trod, trod, trod. Why can't they feel the evil of what they're doing? Because they're wearing shoes. They're disconnected from feeling the earth, and they're disconnected from feeling anything at all. By the way, we get some alliteration in foot, feel, which reinforces the connection between feet and feeling. Without our feet touching the earth, we cannot feel. In other words, we lose our ability to feel, to connect, to empathize, to reflect. When we lose our connection with nature, with God, we lose our connection with our own feelings. Since we're now moving to the second stanza, let's recap what we saw in stanza 1. We saw the great power and presence of God through nature in the first 3 lines. Then we saw in lines 4 to 8 that men have been destroying nature and disregarding God. However, stanza 2 presents a critical shift in the poem. Look at how the first line opens. And for all this, in other words, after all this happens, when all is said and done, despite everything that man has done to ruin nature. And what do we see next? Nature is never spent. Can you imagine that? After all of the trampling, the pollution, the disobedience, nature is never spent. In this case, to be spent means to be exhausted, to be finished, to run out of energy, out of substance. No matter how much we fight against nature, no matter how much we abuse the grandeur of God, it will never disappear. We can never destroy it. The tone of the poem takes a complete 180. We move from the despair and disappointment and frustration to hope and confidence. The alliteration in nature and never adds emphasis to the fact that nature's energy is never spent. It is unlimited. Do you know of some persons who go through the toughest circumstances in life? They're abused by their parents, cut off by family, thrown away by society. Their friends leave, their teachers give up on them. But in the end, they come out on top. This is God's grandeur coming out on top, surviving man's wickedness, enduring man's abuse. Let's take a second look at the word spent here, as it reminds us of trade in line 6, in that both spending and trading are aspects of commerce, economy. In the first line of the second stanza, we see that nature is never spent. Think of the spent here as with spending money. This line can mean that nature is forever separated from the business of man. Nature cannot be a part of our human transactions. No man can buy or sell nature, because no man can own nature. Nature isn't man's grandeur, but God's grandeur. We continue with this sense of hope and life, the same energy that the poem started out with. There lives the dearest freshness, deep down things. This line means that even though mankind has soiled nature, has trampled upon nature, nature is still fresh and vibrant. The freshness of nature can still be seen. But where is this freshness? Where is the dearest freshness? It is deep down things. It means if you want to see the true, splendid, untouched beauty of nature, you have to search for it. You have to travel for miles or take a deep dive under the ocean or go way up high to places man have not yet spoiled. Nature retains its perfect beauty, but to see it, you have to go out of your way to search for it. Let's get a little deeper into this line by paying attention to diction. As a noun, a dearest is a beloved person, a loved one. It can even be used romantically and can therefore be a synonym for honey or sweetheart. Calling someone dearest means that they are the dearest or most precious person to you. This meaning of preciousness is captured by yet another definition of dearest. As the superlative form of dear, dearest can mean most expensive. If something is expensive, then it is dear. This idea of preciousness is important for a few reasons. For one, it reminds us that nature is rich and splendid. It has great worth. This matches up with the oozing oil from line 3. Another significance of the preciousness is that it creates a contrast between two value systems. In line 6, we see how men perceive value, and we realize that For us, it is all about money and things. But here, we have a different kind of value, the infinite value of nature. Let's take a quick look at deep down. The deepness and downness are further connected and emphasized through the alliterated d sound. Also, deep conjures up many natural images, particularly that of the deep blue sea. We also imagine steep valleys as being deep. Deep here gives us not just some spatial imagery, but also some chromatic imagery, meaning it talks about color. When a color is deep, it is rich, pure. For example, a deep blue is very blue. A deep red is very red, like blood. Deep also means real, genuine, profound, as opposed to superficial. For example, you can think about something, or you can think deeply about something. You can love someone, or you can love someone deeply. You can be in trouble, or you can be in deep trouble. All of this combines to tell us that nature is rich and ripe. It is concentrated. It is not dilute or weak. What about down? Well, of course, we have that downward direction. But that actually connects to the same earth that men have been treading upon. What is down? What is beneath our feet? The earth. The same soil that we saw in line 7. We can find the freshness of nature in the earth beneath us. But maybe we have to dig past the surface. Beneath the surface is an abundance of life, an underworld of an untouched ecosystem that thrives with grandeur. Let's look at the next two lines. Line 11 describes a sunset, and line 12 describes a sunrise. In line 11, we see the lights going off over in the west, the western hemisphere, the west side. The sun sets in the west. The lights here aren't referring to man-made lights, but the natural light of the sun. But the darkness that follows sunset doesn't last too long. We get a sense of progression and speed with the quick alliterations in last lights and west wind. The line's meter also provides that progression, but we look at meter at the end. In line 12, we see the sunrise with a little more alliteration in the repeated b sounds. The morning has come in the east. In fact, the morning not just comes, but it springs. To spring is to jump quickly. So in nature, even though darkness comes, it is always followed by light. These two lines might actually provide a symbol that summarizes the whole poem. The cycle of sunrise and sunset might symbolize the darkness that man brings to the world, which we saw in stanza 1, and then the sunrise represents the light of God that always wins in the end. We cannot ignore the beautiful imagery in these two lines. First, we see the fading light of dusk, even until the sky turns black. Then, shortly after, we see the brownness, the orange glow of the sunrise. What about brink? Brink means edge. The sun appears to be at the edge of the horizon, or at the edge of a mountaintop when it rises. Brink is also often used to describe a new beginning, a fresh start. For example, the brink of a new day, or the brink of success. It is as if nature has hit the reset button and is springing to life again. And then the poem ends brilliantly. We see why the light comes, why nature remains fresh, why after all that we have done to damage the earth, it is still intact. It is only because the Holy Ghost is over this bent, broken world. By the way, this is a clear biblical allusion that refers to the story of creation, where the Spirit of God moves upon the waters. Look at Genesis 1:2. Now what does the Holy Ghost do in this poem? He broods with warm breast. To brood is to protect, as in an animal protecting its young. It also means to keep an egg warm so that it will hatch. We, the bent, broken world, are just an egg, and God is keeping us warm even though we so often misbehave. He keeps us warm with His breast. He holds us close to His chest, close to His heart. And does He protect us with a frown or with anger or frustration? No, He protects us with ah. The ah here is an interjection of relief and satisfaction. God is happy to protect us. We can also read the ah as being the sound of relief coming from the speaker as he notices God's protecting wings and comforting warmth. Life is getting cold, but then he looks up and he can relax because he sees the bright wings of God. The metaphor of God being a hen and the world being its egg continues at the end as we see God's bright wings. Let's look at the diction in these last two lines. We see the Holy Ghost, which here is the presence of God. We see world starting with a capital W, as if it were a person's name. This is because God sees the world as his own child. It's not just a thing that he throws away if it breaks. We see brood, which, as I said earlier, means to protect or to make warm. Brood also means to worry and to dwell on something. For example, students may be brooding about their exams. The poet chose this word carefully to capture these two meanings. God protects us and keeps us warm because he worries about us. He's ever concerned about us. We see the warm breast. Breast here can mean chest, the bosom of God. But it can also refer to a mother's breast. And here, God might be compared to a mother nursing her baby. We're almost there. Now, let's just take a quick look at the poem's form. How does the arrangement of words on the page contribute to the poem's themes? First of all, the poem is a sonnet, specifically a Petrarchan sonnet, also called an Italian sonnet. That's why it has 14 lines divided into an octave, which is 8 lines, and a sestet, which is 6 lines. This is the regular form of a Petrarchan sonnet. As usual, the first stanza of the sonnet tells us a problem. In this case, mankind is messing up nature. And as usual, the second stanza gives us the solution to that problem, which is the fact that God is protecting us and maintaining nature with his infinite love and power. Most sonnets are written in iambic pentameter. Check out the lesson on meter for more information on that. However, many lines do not follow this meter in this poem. And this indicates that just as how man has messed up nature to some degree, the poem itself is messed up and not metrically perfect. As usual, we have a rhyme scheme of ABBA, ABBA, CD, CD, CD. Check out the lesson on rhyme and rhyme schemes for more on that. Well, there you have it. If you learned a lot from this analysis and you want to keep seeing analyses like these, then go ahead and subscribe. And I'd surely appreciate a like on this video. See you in the next one.